I'm the Deputy Director of Community Engagement at the MBTA, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's meeting. We really appreciate you joining us for tonight. Tonight's meeting is to share information and receive feedback on the MBTA's Green Line C Branch Station Accessibility Upgrades Project in alignment with the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. Robbie Bassnett, our Project Manager for Green Line Transformation, as well as Tass Paganelli, our Director of Environmental Review and Permitting, will give the presentation. And we ask that you please hold all of your comments till the end of the presentation. Before we get started, like I mentioned, we'll be going over a few announcements and meeting controls for folks who are not familiar with Zoom. Next slide, please. Like I mentioned, our presenters for tonight will be the MBTA, MEPA, as well as our design team, and we'll go into more details toward the presentation as well. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so alongside that, our first announcement is that the MBTA activities, including our public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements, preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, we ask that you visit the website there on your screen to reach our Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. We're also offering language interpretation for this meeting tonight. We'll be offering Spanish, Haitian Creole, Chinese, Russian, and ASL during this meeting. If you need language assistance, you can either, if you're in this room here, you can come to the check-in table to get a translation headset. You would have already gotten that because our interpreters are in the front communicating with all of you if you need it. But if you're in this Zoom meeting right now, you can click on the small globe icon and select the language that you prefer, and you'll be able to meet your interpreter there in that room. We're also offering technical assistance in the Zoom chat. If you have a technical question about Zoom or the features of this meeting, we ask that you use the chat function, and our technical assistant will be able to attempt to troubleshoot your problem and get back to you with any answer that you may need. So feel free to use the chat. We're here both in person and virtually to make sure the meeting is as accessible as possible for all of you here. And with that, we also have closed captioning. So alongside our ASL interpreter, we'll also have closed captioning in this meeting. What you can do is click on closed caption to start viewing the closed captioning, and click and drag the closed captioning to move its position in the meeting window to align with your needs. So whether that's adjusting the caption size or looking on the video settings to make sure that it's all in alignment with what works best for you and your screen right now. And with that, I'll now pass this over to Julie Lynch.
Thank you, Ashley. I have some prepared remarks. As Ashley said, we'll follow with comments. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and we would like to begin this evening by thanking the town of Brookline for hosting this meeting. My name is Julie Lynch. I am the Senior Director of MBTA Green Line Transformation. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us both virtually and in person to review and discuss the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA, as it's called. This is a submission for the C Branch Station Accessibilities Upgrades Project, and it is an important milestone for this project. The purpose of this meeting is to gather comments from the public regarding the project's MEPA notification, which was submitted on December 16th to the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act Office, or MEPA. This project received federal funding to provide accessible stations along the C Branch, expanding access to people of all abilities. The MBTA is prioritizing accessibility as it works to expand ridership with new Type 10 trains, which we will discuss further in this presentation. To date, the project team has been coordinating closely with the town of Brookline staff, as well as town boards and commissions. This project coordination will continue as the project develops through a design build project delivery method. This method of delivering a project will allow for continued coordination, for instance, on the town's upcoming bridle path project, tree evaluation, traffic, and parking. The MBTA submission that we are focused on this evening is an evaluation of environmental considerations for the project at 30% design. This is a point in time, and as noted, the design will continue to develop, and coordination with all stakeholders will continue to be part of this process. We will provide information at the end of this presentation on how to provide comments on the MEPA submission. Please note as well that there's a link on the Sea Branch project website to learn how to submit comments. Finally, all comments from our meeting this evening will be tracked for consideration by the town and the project team. All of your comments are important to us. The agenda this evening is as noted. We'll begin with the state environmental review process overview, followed by a project overview, potential environmental impacts and proposed mitigation, climate change resiliency, environmental justice, next steps for the project, and any questions. Thank you.
Alex, this is you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Trisky. I'm an environmental analyst in the MEPA office. As you mentioned, MEPA stands for Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And MEPA is administered by the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Rebecca Tepper. So we're conducting this review on her behalf. The purpose of MEPA is to, I should say MEPA is not a permitting process. The purpose of MEPA is to evaluate projects at a more comprehensive level before they're finalized so that the public has a chance to review the project at a relatively early stage and for the benefit of state agencies who are reviewing or permitting or implementing, as in the case of the MBTA, those projects. As Julie mentioned, the MBTA has filed an environmental notification form, which is under review. The comment period ends on the 22nd, right? And I want to emphasize that while I'll be taking notes. The T apparently will be maybe addressing all the comments at some point, but it's important for you to submit comments to the MEPA office by email or by the through the public comments portal, which is listed there. The comments portal can also be accessed through the MEPA Environmental Monitor. So you can Google MEPA Environmental Monitor and you'll find a link to comment. So the purpose of MEPA is to ensure the projects take all feasible measures to avoid damage to the environment. And key elements of our review are alternatives analysis and analysis of mitigation measures. We're also focused increasingly on climate change resiliency and on environmental justice, public health issues. So I will leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kate Harson, to talk about environmental justice.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. You can keep it on that slide. Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Harson. I work with Alex at the MEPA office as the environmental justice coordinator there. I'm happy to be with you all here in person and over the Zoom. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the principles of environmental justice and how we're working to apply those through the MEPA review process. So for those of you who might not be aware, environmental justice at its core is the belief that all people, regardless of race, background, or income, have the right to enjoy an environment free of contamination, an environment that is beneficial to their health. And that they also have the right to equal access to the decision-making processes that impact their environment. So through that, MEPA has started to require back in 2022 that projects that are proposed within environmental justice neighborhoods or nearby environmental justice neighborhoods take additional action and go through the EIR review process, which is essentially a more involved and in-depth review of proposed projects. And those that additional assessment for the environmental justice portion of projects involves completing a assessment of the existing conditions in the EJ neighborhoods near a project. So proponents are required to report the quantity of sources of pollution and some of the public health data in those communities. So something like childhood asthma or heart attack rates are all, data points that would be included in the environmental justice portion of the EIR. In addition, projects have to determine whether or not these EJ neighborhoods have existing burdens And if they do, determine whether their projects have any potential to basically exacerbate any of those conditions. And then on the flip side of that, MEPA also requires that projects that are proposed nearby environmental justice populations engage in enhanced public participation measures to meaningfully reach the communities that are within the EJ populations. So there's a variety of strategies to meet this, but something like, you know, a hybrid meeting like we're doing today, something like going into the community and meeting them where they are and having, you know, frequent and often communications around the project can be some examples. But I'll be around and can answer any questions for folks. Thank you so much.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ravi Basnet, MBTA Project Manager for the Green Line Seabrand Station Accessibility Updates Project. These station updates will provide greater access for all riders as well as improve safety. Stations are Hawes Street, Kent Street, St. Paul Street, Summit Ave, Brandon Hall, Fairbanks Street, Tappan Street, Dean Road, and Englewood Avenue. We have been working closely with residents, elected officials, and the Department of Public Works to make these important accessibility improvements while keeping impacts to a minimum, including protecting trees along the corridor of priority for both the MBTA and the Brookline community. Tonight, we will present our plan to make the Seabrands accessible and prepare for new Type 10 trains with construction throughout 2026. To accomplish this work, the MBTA will use surges, weekend outages, and station bypass to balance service disruption with customer needs. Our team has extensive experience managing and delivering projects in Brookline, and we are excited to work together again on these accessibility improvements. The map on the slide highlights stations planned for upgrades, including a new consolidated Fairbanks Street and Brandon Hall station and the closure of Kent Street station due to its proximity to St. Paul and Hawes Street station. This slide includes the photos of existing condition. The current Seabrand station lack essential accessibility features. Platforms lack adequate space and are too close to vehicular traffic. Insufficient signage creates confusion and hinders navigation, especially for visually impaired passengers. Platforms with obstacles like poles and trees create barriers for mobility device users. Uneven surface cause tripping hazards and difficulties for wheelchair, stroller, and shopping cart users. Insufficient lighting reduces visibility and safety, particularly in low light conditions. This slide includes diagrams of planned platform upgrades. The MBTA has planned near-term and future station improvements. The diagram on the left depicts the existing platform conditions, a platform too low to deploy vehicle bridge plates for access, uneven and narrow platforms with insufficient turning radius for mobility devices, and no rider separation from traffic. The near-term platform upgrades depicted in the center include raising platforms 8 inches and widening to a minimum of 7 feet 6 inches for accessible turning radiuses. These improvements will allow for the operations of all legacy trains as well as the new single Type 10 trains. These enhancements will allow for automated bridge plate deployment for all trains equipped with bridge plates. Additionally, traffic barriers as well as lighting, benches, and other platform amenities will also be installed as part of this project. As new double Type 10 trains are fully deployed, additional improvements in a future project will raise the platform height to 14 inches for level boarding, eliminating the need for bridge plates and extend the platform length to 225 feet. Platform canopies and enhanced real-time signage will also be provided. This slide includes the plan for boarding improvement. As mentioned earlier, planned platform upgrades will improve access for all riders. Clear areas are maintained at accessible door locations for mobility devices. Platform amenities are located to ensure unobstructed travel. Adequate space is provided around fixed installations like lights and catenary poles. On this slide is a list of platform amenities included in this project. Platform amenities such as benches, crash receptacles, real-time train arrival sign, also known as e-ink signs, cameras, and lighting. Emergency call box will be located on every platform, east and westbound. I will now pass it over to our MBTA environmental team to talk about potential environmental impacts and proposed mitigation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tess Paganelli. I'm the Director of Environmental Permitting and Review here at the T. Alex and Kate gave a great introduction to the MEPA regulations, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how MEPA is applying to us and what we're working through. So one of the many things that MEPA regulates is the taking of public shade trees. As many of our C branch riders can attest, some of our stations have trees that grow within the station itself, creating barriers and obstacles. The improvements required to make these stations accessible will require the removal of some of those trees. It's important to us that the community know that we understand the value of public shade trees, and we're taking the removal of even one shade tree very seriously. We brought in a certified arborist to assess each tree, not just for size and species, but also for health. As currently proposed in the expanded environmental notification form, which is kind of as talked about a little bit before, the document that we've submitted to MEPA, we are accounting for the removal of a total of 32 public shade trees across all 7 accessible stations, creating 7 fully accessible stations. This is the maximum amount of trees that we would take, and we are actively trying to reduce that number by working with our design engineers and the town of Brookline to find creative ways to save as many as we can. We're also coordinating with the town on a tree replanting plan to replace the trees we take, and potentially, even more importantly, on a maintenance plan to ensure the trees we plant survive and thrive. Oh, wait. No, go back. Back again. There we go. One of the MBTA's most critical climate goals is encouraging the mode shift from cars to transit, getting cars off the road and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This project will increase accessibility of our stations for more riders, as well as improving safety and efficiency of service, all of which will serve to enhance rider experience and encourage use of our transit system. We have received some comments and concerns about the heat island effect as a result of removal of public shade trees. And we hope to mitigate any potential heat island effect through working closely with the town on that tree replanting plan and ensuring adequate tree coverage. More information can be found in attachment 3 of the EENF, which is available online. If you want some more information on our climate change resiliency, especially our analysis in accordance with the state's climate resilience design standards tool. Kate gave a great introduction on how MEPA reviews for projects within and adjacent to environmental justice populations go, which includes our project. So this project serves to improve station accessibility for all riders and communities served by the C branch. and is not anticipated to have disproportionate adverse effects on environmental justice populations. Some high-level outreach thus far includes Ashley's excellent effort at flyering at Brookline Village and Coolidge Corner stations, some email blasts to project stakeholders, as well as advanced notifications on the environmental justice screening form. There is, again, more detailed information on outreach and future planned outreach in our public involvement plan, which is found in attachment 5 of the environmental notification form. Some next steps for MEPA, so people kind of know what to expect. The public comment period goes through January 22nd, 2025. We are anticipating and hoping for a certificate to be issued around January 29th. Important note is that in the filing that we've submitted to MEPA, we have requested a rollover environmental impact report, or EIR. In the event that this request is granted, the EIR would be republished in the Environmental Monitor, and a new public comment period would be initiated. So there will be, for everybody involved, there will be another opportunity through the MEPA process for public comment. And Alex, did you want to do anything final notes? No, good. So Ashley, I would hand it over to you for questions. We are encouraging questions, comments. Happy to answer those.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Julie. After learning about this project, we'd love to hear from all of you virtually as well as in this room. And the public comment period is now open. So how we'll be doing that is through many different ways. The first is that if you'd like to share a comment, we'll accept them in those methods, verbal, written, as well as in the chat. So we ask that if you use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen, submit some of your questions there, and I'll be stating them verbatim in this room so that our staff here can help answer any of your questions. I saw some of them in the chat. I've noted them mainly from you, Richard. So I'll go with that first. And then we'll move from, I'll go for that after we present with the remainder. Sorry about that. One moment. Sorry, I'm getting some other chats privately. Okay, so to speak verbally, if you're here in the Zoom screen, we ask that you press the raise hand button. If you're on the phone, you can press *9. Attendees who speak any other languages that were here in the room, Tahitian Creole, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, you can simply press the raise hand and our interpreter in your room will be able to state your question to us so that we can help answer that for you. When recognized, you'll be asked to be unmuted to speak anytime that you raise your hand. And also, if you're in the chat and want to speak afterward, just simply raise your hand and we'll get to it. Before opening up the floor to the public, we'd like to invite any elected officials or their staff to ask questions or make comments. And you can also use the raise hand feature so that you'll be able to be recognized. I see Representative Vitolo, you have your hand raised. So we will ask you to be unmuted in just one moment. You should see that come up on your screen now.
How we doing? Did that work?
Is it working for you?
Can we hear? I'm not done.
Let me check just one moment, Representative. You should be unmuted.
Yeah, it seems like it's the
Okay, one moment. We're just troubleshooting on this end. Give us one moment to do that here on the screen.
testing again. Testing.
Okay, I see what's going on.
Testing.
Okay, Representative, let's try now.
Testing it again.
Yes, it's working perfectly. Thank you for your
That's
patience.
great. No,
Mhm.
thank you for navigating a different town hall and a different IT system every night, I'm sure. My
That's
name is
okay.
Tommy Vitolo. I am the state representative for North Brookline, the state representative district that has the most MBTA stations in it, and I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud to say that I ride the Green Line to the State House darn near every day. Um, I want to sort of make a general comment first, and that is I'm really proud that the T went out and got money for disability access improvements, something really important, and is also using that same money to achieve other important objectives, including preparing platforms for future longer cars, the so-called supercars, and putting the platform on the far side of the intersection so that transit signal prioritization, a technology that allows the green line to get the green light, can be implemented. That's something that Brookline Town Meeting supported with a $50,000 allotment almost a decade ago, and something that I was able to work with the T to deploy in a small way on the green line during COVID. And this is really exciting that we have the opportunity to expand that. A couple of things I just wanted to flag to make sure the T was being thoughtful about and to help people in the room kind of imagine what we're talking about. The B line station consolidations just west of the BU Bridge are really nice examples of what
Yeah.
the platforms will look like when complete in Brookline, right?
Yeah.
You've got that wall to protect the people who are waiting from errant automobiles. Imagine standing at the platform St. Paul inbound with the cars coming down Beacon Street, whizzing by you on one side, the train on the other side. It's not safe. It's not appropriate. And this is a really
Yeah.
important upgrade.
Very dangerous.
Of course, for people who have wheelchairs or walkers or strollers or so-called granny carts, these are all really important improvements. And so I'm really excited about this in the big picture. We're making a heck of an omelet. We are going to crack some eggs. And I think it's healthy for us to really talk about those details and make sure we minimize the inevitable small downsides that are going to come out of this. And I'm really grateful we're doing that. I have particular concerns or conversation around Kent Hawes and around Fairbanks, Brandon Hall. I don't know if this is the appropriate time for that or if there's going to be a second round after going through the details. So I don't want to get ahead. Can I get a little feedback if now is the right time or if I should wait on those?
Feel free. Feel free
Okay.
to-
I want to talk first about Kent and Hawes. Both stations are relatively lightly used. My understanding is Kent is used slightly more than Hawes. Hawes is closer to the middle between St. Paul and St. Mary's. And so, it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I can appreciate the T not wanting to keep both. They are fairly close together. And the question is, if we're going to eliminate one, which one? I would observe that both Kent and Hawes have a substantial medical building immediately adjacent to the platform, that Kent has Temple Ahobai Shalom right there, which not only is a community center and a religious center, it's also a daycare. On the other hand, there are actually more homes closer to Hawes because it doesn't have a large synagogue just there. And so I don't have a clear answer as to which is preferred. I think that we should think about the consequences of each, including which preserving which one preserves the most street trees, right? Is there an impact on street trees? The last comment I have on Hawes and Kent, and it's a concern that I would like the T to publicly comment on, is this. I could imagine a future 11 years from now or so when more platform work is done, where the St. Mary's platform shifts westward to Carlton Street. And one would do that for the same reason all the other platforms are being sited where they are. By putting the platforms on the far side of the intersection, you get more transit signal prioritization. If we keep Hawes and then there's a push to move the St. Mary's platform to Carlton, now those two platforms will be very close together. And my concern is the T today is saying, let's get rid of Kent and we'll keep Hawes. And then 10 or 12 years from now says, we want to move St. Mary's to Carleton. Let's get rid of Hawes too. And then we'll only have a St. Mary's Carleton platform and then a St. Paul platform. That's too far apart in my view. And what I don't want to do is make a decision now that tees up a decision later to eliminate both. I think that would be a real problem. I could imagine that happening. I don't think anyone today is envisioning that. But frankly, I think a lot of people working on this today won't be working on that project 12 years from now. And so I would like some reassurance from the T that hell or high water, between now and 2050, there will remain a platform available between what is now St. Mary's or Carleton and St. Paul. I don't want to have no platforms there. And that's a long term I'm concerned the T could land at. I'd like to get some feedback from the T that that's not going to happen. Is it possible to get that feedback?
Are working, as you know, with the town of Brookline staff, including DPW. We meet bi-weekly to review the project, and we are looking to future-proof the project. As you know, the platforms are going to be extended at some point to 225 feet. We want to consider what that means when we talk about distances between stations. The DPW staff has also brought up similar concerns to you. What are the T's considerations for closing stations in the future? As far as I know, at this point, we don't have any decisions made. I'm going to turn it over to the engineer, our designer of record, to talk about that in a moment. But this is an ongoing process, a communication. We're going to be developing the C branch along with the town of Brookline to get the best outcomes. I assure you of that. We're not here to say tonight that, you know, we are definitively doing A or B. I've already received a lot of comments even before the meeting started. People are passionate about this. They have a lot of good ideas, and our engineers are on board, as well as the T, to hear all of those ideas and incorporate what we can. We don't want to have missteps where we have to go back and rethink. We want to be able to say, this is what we can afford to do now, and we want to move forward this work with an eye to where we want to go in the long run. So we completely agree with that. I don't know if Tim or Mark, you'd like to say some words?
Sure. Hi, folks. Mark Shavin from BHP. We are designers for the MBTA, working as program and construction managers. Representative, we've spoken to you before. Appreciate your comment. Just the first part of your question having to do with why choose Kent versus Hawes, and you sort of alluded to it in your points. The distances between various stations are very much a consideration in terms of what we would close or not close. If you think about where the stations are and think about closing Hawes in particular, if you removed Hawes, kept Kent, and kept St. Mary's, you're more than 2,000 feet between those two stations. We really try to keep our stations between a quarter mile, which would be somewhere in the 1,200 to 1,500 foot range. So we prefer not to close a station and make people walk that much further to their other station. To the other point, nothing is presupposed with respect to St. Mary's in the future or any station in the future. It's certainly true that something will need to happen to St. Mary's because it's curved. It actually has an S curve in the middle of it. And when we try to go to level boarding, an S curve isn't going to work. So we're going to have to do something to push some part of that station, at the very least, closer to Carleton Street. But it doesn't mean we need to move the whole thing to Carleton Street. So it is a question. You know, there's certainly some discussion around what's going to be done in the future. I think from a quote tree impact point of view, it'd be smarter to try to extend St. Mary's a little bit closer to Kent, just extending it, not moving it all together. Excuse me, to Carleton instead of moving it all together, because that would have fewer tree impacts. Obviously, there's also a lot more demand at St. Mary's. Even today, it's like 3 or 4 times the station desire at Hawes Street. So again, when you consider the population that's using these stations, how far apart the stations are, et cetera, that's why Kent was chosen.
Thank you. That's helpful. And, you know, I'm not gonna let go on this issue. I hope
You're muted.
One moment, Representative.
How about now? Testing.
Yes, it's perfect.
Oh,
Please.
great, great. So I appreciate that answer, and I get that it would be hard at this meeting to make a promise about 10 years in the future. I will continue working on this particular issue and work to get the T to make a stronger commitment to that in the future. So I'm sure you'll indulge me then. The other platforms I wanted to discuss are Brandon Hall and Fairbanks. The initial, the very early design I saw has been dramatically improved, and I'm grateful for the T for responding to the initial feedback to come up with what I think is a much better design. And I don't expect the MBTA to get into all of the details in that platform plan, but I can tell the public that the T made some decisions that allow it to comply with federal law while preserving amenities and access that otherwise they would have to remove. And so I think the T did some nice work on Brandon Hall and Fairbanks. I appreciate that there's an argument to keep Fairbanks because it's closer to a large building with seniors, some of whom are disabled. But I would remind us that the distance between the platforms is measured in several hundreds of feet, that there is substantial buildings at Brandon Hall as well, and that Brandon Hall is in fact roughly the equidistant point between Summit and Washington. So again, it's sort of the elegant place. I've spoken with the T and I've spoken with the town, and I hope that we will maintain this commitment. It is important to me that the Fairbanks crossing remains. And so it's out of the proposed scope of work, which should allow it to remain. For pedestrians, the ability to walk up Fairbanks, cross, climb the stairs, cross, and then go up the next street is important permissivity for the pedestrian network. I want to hear the T say, we are not going to try and prevent pedestrians from crossing at that Fairbanks crossing, even though there won't be a platform there. That's an important access point for pedestrians having nothing to do with the T. And it's important that we preserve that pedestrian access point, even though that stairwell and that crossing won't be part of boarding and alighting for the MBTA anymore. I like that the new design has a single ramp, and I appreciate that the design of the ramp, the siting of it was to minimize loss of trees. We need that ramp. The current status is wheelchair lifts at the stairs that require a key. That's not meeting our modern day ADA standard. The ramp is a good thing, and I think the T did a really nice job there. So I'm very happy with the revised Fairbanks Brandon Hall consolidation. I am sure the MBTA and the town will work together to manage those crossings of Beacon Street. At Fairbanks, you have a protected red light. At Brandon Hall, you have a flashing yellow. It is not as safe, and it doesn't feel as safe for pedestrians. And so trying to make sure that we end up with the hardware, the paint, the lights, so that people can cross from either side Beacon Street to the median to get to the train is really important. And I know the T is happy to work with the town on that. And so I just want to urge both folks to work together and make sure that even slow-moving pedestrians can safely get across Beacon Street, frankly, at all the platforms, but particularly if there's not a red light to protect them. And for the folks on the room and the folks on Zoom, I'm always happy to take your feedback as well. And you should feel free to call me anytime. My cell phone number is 617-872-8921. And I'm delighted that the T is working on this. I think we're going to have a really great outcome at the end. And I look forward to hearing the comments of some other folks and how we can make the final design even a little bit better. Thanks very much for letting me go on this long, and thanks so much for all of your efforts.
Of course, and thank you, Representative. Just one moment. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your patience. Julie, would you like to respond to anything at all?
Yes, I could just briefly respond that you are correct. We are working with the town closely. That's been identified as a site that people use to cross. We want to increase our ridership. We want people to be able to access conveniently and safely to our platforms. And I'm going to let Mark comment on any particulars for that. It's not a terribly technical issue. It's just pedestrian access, but we are looking at it and we understand correct timing on lights, et cetera. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think to the point that the representative made, we are going to keep this crossing open at Fairbanks. We're going to have a ramp at Fairbanks and a ramp at Brandon Hall and maintain the pedestrian crossings of Beacon Street at those two locations. So everything is going to stay as it is and there'll be no reduction in crossings. I see another question here. Is that a follow-up to this?
Yeah, of something that you just said. You said that there are gonna be ramps in both Brandon Hall and.
So
in
that's what we're
Fairbanks.
looking at doing right now. That's kind of the feedback that we've received from
So
folks.
the one that was gonna be in front of Stone Home is not gonna be there anymore. The new stop that was proposed.
So we
between the
had,
two?
you are correct, that we had
Oh, that's good.
included a consolidated crossing location in the original design, but based on all the feedback we've received from everybody, we're now going to maintain the two stairways and we're going to provide ramps at both stairways and maintain the crossings of the tracks and the roadway.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other elected officials or their staff that would like to communicate at this time? Please use the raise hand feature and we will ask you to be unmuted. Just one moment.
Hello? Can you hear me okay? I can't tell if you're hearing me. No?
Yes,
Oh,
we can hear you.
Wonderful. Good evening. My name is Arisa Boyd. I am town meeting member in precinct 15 and also a preservation commissioner. Thank you for the presentation. And last evening, when the Preservation Commission met, we discussed this project. And one of our concerns is that we have not had any communication from MEPA, from the T in general about this. And of course, this is a very historic project. You didn't speak much to the bridle path this evening. And so I have a few different questions for you. I mean, I believe we sent out a letter today, not even clear if we are going to be consulted after the public comment, since nobody has sent a letter, and traditionally we would have gotten letters from you by now. So we'd like to know where exactly what our timeline is, if we are going to need an extension to weigh in on this. Of course, you know, we are certified local government on behalf of the Mass Historical state level. We Brookline should be the one weighing in. So when we're removing trees and things like that, that is of course part of the Olmsted vision. And so we are wondering if anyone has evaluated the original design versus what's being proposed. And we'd like to know which trees are being tagged so that we can kind of get an idea of what the cultural impact is going to be, because environmental justice, I believe, also relates to historic, our rights to our history and preserving that. You know, we think at the Preservation Commission, not in terms of 10 years or 20 years or 40 years, but in decades and centuries. And so we'd like to make sure that, you know, this project began in 1887 with Olmsted and the first electronic trolley cars. So it's incredibly important to the Preservation Commission that we be thinking about this holistically and the impact that it will have culturally on the town of Brookline as well. So I don't know if MEPA has looked at the cultural impact. Again, the town has talked a lot about the bridle path and things like that, but we haven't seen any kind of Well, we haven't seen anything from you, to be honest, with regards to preservation. So another commissioner and I would like to be able to have that information so that we can walk the sites and look at what exactly those are going to look like, so that hopefully if it was anybody else working with you in the design phase, as opposed to the design being sent to us, you know, kind of as a fait accompli. And we'd love to be involved so that we can make sure that we don't have hurdles later. Because again, these are also legal challenges for the state and the town to overcome, and we want to be able to work alongside with you. So if you could comment on those things, I would appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Arisa. Julie, do you have any comment or Tess?
Yes, go right ahead and start. I have some pieces.
I'll turn over for a bridal path conversation, but I can start with, in terms of our not very loud. In terms of our historic consultation, so this is kind of our first step in our environmental review process. We are also going to be undergoing the National Environmental Policy Act process through FTA. And so the bulk of our historic consultation will happen with MHC through the Section 106 process, so that has not been submitted yet. So we would be happy, we're working with FTA on that currently, but would certainly be happy to consult with you as well as through part of our NEPA Section 106 process. So here, it's not that you haven't seen anything and MHC has, nothing has gone to MHC yet. But we certainly have evaluated the historic district as part of this MEPA filing, and there is a section on the form where we discuss that. But I'm happy to, I know we also got a comment on a meeting we'll be having, I know I got that feedback right in my face. And potentially doing a presentation for you guys to get you involved. So thank you for coming, thank you for commenting. And happy
you'll be able to
coordinate more
give
with
us a
you on that.
presentation. You'll be working on bringing a presentation.
So you're
Oh, sorry.
and then we can follow up on the.
Can you hear me? I just want to confirm that means you will be doing a presentation. Then we sent a letter for a request for a presentation, and you're going to be able to do that for us. Perhaps I'm muted still.
Tess said, I think we should be able to do that. I don't see a reason why not, Arisa, if you didn't hear that part.
Oh, I did. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, just one moment. Okay, and then Tess is going to address one more comment. Are you all able to hear Tess right now? Perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple words. Marissa, thank you so much for your comments.
It is hard to hear you. Can you get closer to a mic? I'm sorry.
I know
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Oops, now it's backbeat.
Okay, let's try this again.
Thank you, Ashley. Can you hear me now, Marissa? A little bit. I'll speak up. Okay. Not formally to the Preservation Commission, but through DPW. I've spoken a few times or emailed back and forth with Tina McCarthy about this project. We are scheduled to come and speak with you, not only through the lens of the environmental situation, but through just a overall project presentation to your team. We are, very sympathetic to the fact that this is an historic and moreover important corridor for the culture of the town of Brookline. We want your feedback, and the town will continue to interact with all the boards and commissions on the town until we get it right. We're in this together, and we'll be making decisions, difficult decisions, hand in hand with the town of Brookline. It's a sensitive project. Upgrades have not been made for quite some time, and we understand, and we'll be working together with you all to get that right. We could certainly have a joint meeting to talk about environmental aspects, because I think that's going to go hand in hand with the general project overview. We also have upcoming meetings, in the coming months with other boards and commissions that you can certainly attend as well, but we'll specifically meet more than one time, certainly with the Preservation Commission. This is an ongoing process. It's iterative, and we'll continue to seek your advice and input.
Thank you
Did
so
want to
much. I
speak to
appreciate
the
it.
bridal path, or Tim?
Yeah,
Just one moment, he's coming to the screen now.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, hi, Tim Rustico with the VHB on the design team. Just to speak quickly about the bridle path, I know that was a historic bridle path that ran along Beacon Street, as you mentioned, Arissa. And I know that there is an ongoing project the town of Brookline is working on to reinstate that bridle path. So through our design process, we were looking at that bridle path, how it will coordinate with the stations themselves. And I know that the team working with the town of Brookline was also kind of doing the inverse, where they were looking at the station improvements. So I feel confident that both projects will be able to proceed and work with one another to make sure that they can come to fruition in the future.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Okay, do we have any more questions or comments here in the chat from anyone? Any elected officials or their staff?
Are you taking comments from elected officials in the room as well?
Oh, yes, in the room as well. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, in the sea of technical things, please go right ahead. Thank you so much for your time.
My name is John Rumpler, town meeting member, precinct 11. I live just up the hill from the Brandon Hall stop. So I just want to speak about one particular narrow issue that Representative Vitolo mentioned, and that is the impact at Brandon Hall. And as happens every single time, 4 to 5 cars blew right through that intersection despite the flashing yellow lights. So if this is going to be the main consolidated place, we're going to need an actual red light that cars are going to stop at for the safety and accessibility of pedestrians. I realize that may not be within the MBTA's control. I don't even know if that's the town of Brookline's control, because I'm told that this is a DOT road. But what I would like to ask from MBTA is, what efforts are you making to communicate this urgent pedestrian safety concern to officials at DOT, so that as part of this project, we can have the red light that I and my constituencies believe pedestrian safety is going to demand with this project. Thank you for all of your efforts. Let me just add, as an environmental advocate in my work life with Environment Massachusetts, I'm thrilled to see all of the work that MBTA is doing, but I'm speaking here just in my capacity as town meeting member. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you so much. We have had initial outreach with Mass DOT regarding this project, because we understand it will be traffic implications to what we are doing. That really is for the town of Brookline to take the lead on, but we have explained to the town of Brookline that we'll be with them, again, side by side, moving this project forward so that we get it right for the town and the MBTA. So it's very important feedback. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
I'm not an elected official.
I don't see any more elected officials in the chat.
So
Raise your
we're-
hand.
Hand over here.
Hello, thank you.
So, my name is Carlos Vidal. I'm a town meeting member for precinct 14. I'm also a registered architect. I'm thrilled with the idea that the T is actually finally going to increase accessibility to all these stations. But I also understand that we have, as Arissa Boyd mentioned before, we have this unique opportunity here because it is a historic, national historic space. And there are many ways of dealing with
with design in historic spaces. The T has done well sometimes, and not so well other times. Representative Butaldo mentioned Commonwealth Avenue as a example of what could happen. Not necessarily a very historically appropriate intervention. The T, for example, has done at Copley Square the head houses, which are modern but are much more related to the historic head houses that were there. So with that in mind, I hope that the design and the detailing and the materials that are used for this very important accessibility project does take into account the historic aspects and characteristics of what is a unique space in not only in Brookline, but also in the nation, as being one of the first to have a bridle path, also to have electric train. So that's sort of a follow-up on what Ms. Boyd said earlier.
Appreciate that. It's exciting feedback, actually. I feel the same way. On a personal note, we are definitely having those conversations. It's important to us. We know that it's important to Brookline. We're glad that we have your support. Of course we do. If we go in the right direction, we want to make sure we do that for you. So I understand the comments that, regarding Commonwealth Avenue. There's a lot of pluses as to what happened there, but you have to look at the context of what you're building in, right? You want it to improve that or support that in a way and not work against it. We want to make sure that we have the vision that Brookline wants when we're finished. We don't want to walk away and have people disappointed. We're spending a lot of money and we're spending a lot of time on this project. We want to get it right. So again, we're not going to be telling you how we're going to be doing it. We're going to be getting feedback from people, running ideas past these commissions and boards and the public, and wanting to get your feedback about, is this in line with the vision that you see as historic? And we're not going back in time with this, right? But we want to be considerate to that. We want to be sensitive to that as we move forward. So I assure you, I'm also an architect, a little bit fish out of water on the horizontal projects right now. But again, I understand that we want to have a space that we're proud of when we finish the project. So it's important. Thank you for the feedback.
Richard and Fran, I'd like to let you know that I do see your hand raised and I'll get to you off shortly. Are there any other elected officials in the room that would like to make a comment? Yes.
Yes, I'm Harry Friedman, a town meeting member from precinct 12. A general comment and then a specific. I find it interesting that the whole front portion of this presentation talked about environmental justice and everything, and yet the project will add 3/10 of an acre of impervious area and remove 32 large trees. I find that somewhat in conflict. One of my questions is there a way to use permeable material that exists instead of some of the impervious stuff, which causes the water to go into the street? And of course, I encourage you to save as many trees as possible. I'm specifically talking about the Tappan Street stop. I had a very nice email from Holly Palmgren, which said that the big tree, which I'm trying to save at Tappan Street, the large oak tree, looks like it may be saved. And I wanted, part of the reason I wanted that saved, it provides the only shade for people who are standing, waiting for a train to go inbound and outbound. And so it's not just important for its environmental effects in general, and the fact that there's a large family of blue jays that happen to live in that tree. But for those of us who are waiting either inbound or outbound, it's a convenient spot to wait under to get yourself shaded. The only other specific thing I wanted to talk about Tappan Street, when the MBTA did station work a number of years ago, there used to be 3 crossings, one at the far western end, one in the middle, and there used to be one at the far eastern end. So when you were getting off an outbound train and you were going sort of backward Washington Square, you used to be able to walk down and then cross over. Now you have to wait for the train to move because there's no crossover there anymore. So I'm hoping that in all this station work, there will be sufficient crossovers for people who want to cross at the end of the station, at the other end of the station, and in the middle of the station.
Before you get a response, would you like to meet Holly? Holly, would you like to write in?
That was a lot. It's great feedback. I'm gonna turn the last question that you had about crossings over to the design team. We have talked about maintaining middle crossings in some locations, but I don't want to have a misstep here. So Mark or Tim, would you mind addressing that?
Yeah, I can talk about that really quick. So at all the stations that we've designed, we have at least 2 crossings of the tracks at each end. We are limited by the platform height and the boarding of the trains to be able to put them in the middle, right? When we have crossings in the middle, obviously trains parking over those becomes a safety hazard. And with the height of the platform, we need to make sure we have the appropriate slope walkways to get down to grade to be able to cross the tracks across. So I think in the design that we've shown and moving forward, it's generally going to be 2 at each station, one located at the east end, one at the west. Tappan Street in particular, where the platforms are parallel to one another right across. In situations where we have staggered platforms where they're across the intersection, there'll be the crossings at the intersection on both sides, as well as the far ends of each platform. So theory, there's sort of 4 in those configurations, but Tappan, the one that you were talking about specifically, where we've got, a platform raised 8 inches above top of rail, and those crossings need to be level with top of rail. It doesn't really work with the boarding and the lighting of the trains to put those crossings right in the middle.
So do these raised platforms now raise a new safety issue that doesn't exist now, which people sort of tripping onto the track?
I don't believe so. 8 inches is about the height of a standard curve on a sidewalk. So I don't think it's a falling hazard. Again, we've got some material along the edge of the platform next to the rail. So it really is about an 8-inch drop there. So I don't believe that there's an additional safety issue that comes up when we have that issue.
Thank you.
Would you improve the safety?
Well, the word improve can mean a number of different things to different people.
Okay.
And to answer your question about impervious materials or pervious materials, we haven't made decisions about materials yet, but we have all of those things running around in our heads as well. We want to make this, deal with stormwater issues as best we can, and that's part of it. So we appreciate that input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other elected officials in the room? Yes.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can go next.
Thanks. John Venskoy, Vice Chair of the Select Board. Couple of comments. I do hope you listen, take very seriously the views of Tommy Vitolo, our state rep on this. No one is a better advocate for public transit than Tommy, and a better protector of the interests of Brookline when it comes to public transit. So I just want to endorse much of what he said tonight. I also want you to recognize always that Brookline has unique attributes. And one of those is we have a high population of senior citizens. I'm one of them. And when you are dealing with that population, you're dealing with people for whom the loss of a station that was, a few blocks away from another station is actually a very serious thing. We space out benches in our commercial areas, recognizing that senior citizens, the elderly, need a place to sit down just to take a walk. And to have to go an extra distance to their stop when they were used to having a stop, near their front door, is very significant. And I'm a little concerned that the net impact of all of this is going to be a system in Brookline on the Sea Line that actually offers less convenience for significant number of people who need convenience, and also, in a sense, less service. And that ties into the whole future, which you say you're planning for, and that's good. But I wish the future, frankly, wasn't going to be the equivalent of 3 car lengths of trolleys arriving and needing that much platform space at each one of these stops. That decision was made a long time ago. I do regret it. It feels like when you get to that point of the future where you are essentially running the equivalent of 3 of today's cars, all linked together, we're going to see less frequent service in Brookline. So we're starting with fewer stations, fewer stops, excuse me. And then maybe 10 years from now, we're looking at a future with maybe less frequent service. So please keep in mind, that's not necessarily an improvement. And everything that has been advertised to the public about this project always uses the word improvement and seems to soft sell that actually you've made decisions which could result in more difficult to access the number of stations and less frequent service over the years. And I'll leave it at that because I do want to hear comment from people who aren't public officials. It's good to come to hearings to hear from not ourselves.
Could I just say one, just briefly to respond to that? So great feedback. We are trying to make improvements. I think one of those improvements that I've heard at the T that we're trying to make is to have more frequent cars, more frequent trains that run on these lines, because that equals convenience for people. And people won't take the T if it's not convenient. They'll take Uber, they'll take Lyft. We'll be their third choice. So we understand that. I think the idea behind the long trains, which 225 feet is not nothing. It's very long, but I think the idea was that we could provide additional capacity. It's because people are, elbowing their way onto these trains, probably during commuter hours. We want to make it more convenient that people say, oh, I know I'll get a seat, because it's a long ride in. It's a half an hour to get downtown from here. And you can't stand that. I can't stand that long, or I don't want to. I could, but so I sympathize with that. So I think there hasn't been, to my knowledge, any discussion about less frequency. We want to try to have more convenient service for people. I probably won't be here in 10 years, but
I probably won't be here in 10 years either.
but that's my take on it in any case.
It's a good goal. It's just, I'm finding it hard to accept the logistics of, because you're gonna have a limited number of these new cars.
Yes.
And then when you start linking them up, that cuts in half the number of cars available for service.
Understood.
How you can do that and have more frequent service, I can't make that work in my head.
Yeah, and these types of comments, we don't just keep this in the design team. We have meetings all the time with the operations teams, with other people that have to do with scheduling, and we want to get it right, and we can't do it unless we talk to all stakeholders, and that means other departments at the T as well. So we share your comments, your feedback, and it is important. And again, I haven't heard anything going in that direction, but you're right, things change over time. And sometimes change is slow and people don't notice, right? So we'll bring that back and have a discussion and bring it up in another meeting, future meeting. We're happy to talk about it again. We can look into that. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
So just
Sorry.
quickly, in terms of the fleet itself, the trains that are coming in are basically replacing the fleet one-to-one. So every train that runs today will have a train in the future with the supercars, the type 10s. In addition, overall, the goal of the program has been to increase capacity, which also means improving the headways and allowing more trains to operate if in fact the demand exists. So we're not anticipating any reduction in service, any reduction in the number of trains that are running on any of these lines. We're limited somewhat until we can fix the central tunnel in terms of how many trains we can run, but you shouldn't see any diminution of the number of trains on the C branch if all the plans hold. Can't guarantee what's happening in the future, but the plan right now is to replace all the trains as they exist and again, try to improve service in the future.
Thank you, Mark. And we are making improvements to the central tunnel, to Mark's point, so that's positive.
Okay, we're just going to transition to the Zoom room for a moment. Richard, you've had your hand raised for a while, so I'm going to ask you to unmute and then you can provide your comment or question. Then I'll transition to you, Fran, and then we'll go back to the main room, okay? Great, I see a thumbs up. Wonderful, Fran. Nice to see you. Just one moment. Richard, whenever I press unmute, you mute yourself again. So are you able to hit unmute? Just one moment, Richard, please. Can anyone hear Richard? I cannot hear Richard. You can write in the chat that you can hear him. Okay, no one can hear Richard. Okay, glad that isn't just us. I'm so sorry about that, Richard. I'm not sure why it's not working for you. Is it okay if you write in the chat and I can transition on to Fran? And then once you're able to unmute, we can come right back to you. But for now, if you can send it in the chat, then you can go, oh, it looks like someone can hear you now. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Richard Murphy, town meeting member, also on the tree protection committee and a few other committees, but just wanted to ask some questions around the number of trees that are slotted or planned right now for removal. You kind of identified those that have a DBH of 14 inches or more to be about 34 or 35 trees. From the first meeting, it was told to us that 83 trees were planned for removal. Are we reducing the number from that, or is it only that in the report you're identifying those trees with a DBH of 14 inches or more?
Richard, are you able to repeat the last part of your question?
Yes. The number of trees that were identified, the tree count was 34, correct?
32.
32 with a DBH
Of 14 inches.
14 inches. All right. Is from the original first meeting, it was identified that there was 83 trees. Is that number still remaining at 83, and only that you're identifying those trees that have a 14-inch or greater DBH?
I can answer that.
I will say we've identified the trees here that are under MEPA jurisdiction, which is the 14 inches DBH, and I'll let Julie.
That's what I was going to say, but I think, John, could you just speak to the
There is a
process
greater
that we've
number
had with
of
trees?
tall trees.
The date that we have, we've looked at the entire corridor. We've identified all impacted trees. Go ahead, John.
That's correct. I'm Don Kinswater with Urban Idea Lab and our lead designer on the project.
Are you able to speak a little bit louder for the folks in the room? And if you can come closer to the camera, there you go.
Yes, the 14 inch trees and larger were the ones that were identified as part of the MEPA document, but there are additional trees that are going to be scheduled for removal. And what we're doing is working with the town now to try to reduce that number to the extent possible. As Julie said, we're meeting every couple of weeks, and Tom Brady, who sadly is no longer here, was an incredible advocate for those trees, and we're going to carry on his work as we go along. And it's not just the number of trees, but the size of the trees. While we can talk about the number, we also want to talk about sort of the cumulative diameter of them all. And that's another piece of analysis we're doing at the moment, and we're going to continue with that. And also, it's coordinating with the town to see what get the best result possible.
And so just to tack on to what Don is saying, we have been adjusting our plans to save as many trees as possible. So, platform locations. Don has also taken a very deep dive in and figured out with Tom Brady, who's left the town of Brookline, the arborist, the tree warden, which trees are unhealthy, so that we know, we can take that information into account as well as we try to save the healthy trees, the larger trees. So that count of 80+ trees that you spoke about is correct, but it includes any tree. What was the minimum diameter you measured? Was it 4 inches?
Anything bigger than 2 inches.
Anything bigger than 2 inches is in that count. So there's a lot of smaller trees. I'm sure you're all familiar with the slope, for instance, at Brandon Hall. There's a lot of smaller trees around that have been considered. Not that those aren't important, but we're trying to save the substantial trees. That's our priority. Thank you just so much, Don.
When you go to echo Arissa's request for, who's on chair
Okay,
of
is
the
there
Preservation
anyone
Committee.
else in the room? I'm now going to ask Fran to unmute, and then you can communicate with us.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Fran.
Okay, so I'm Fran Perler. I'm a town meeting member of Precinct 8. I'm also a member of the Council on Aging, and I would like to follow up on some of the comments relating to consolidation of stops and placement of stops. Currently, Brookline has over 20% of its population as seniors, and it's the largest growing segment of our population. This past Monday, the Brookline Community Action Network's LCAC had a almost hour discussion of the Fairbanks Brandon Hall stops. And some of the issues that are brought up seem to be not, I don't know how to say politely, ignored by MBTA, in the fact that if you look at those stops, the north side of Beacon Street is about 15 to 20 feet higher than the south side. The Fairbanks stop is at a large senior living housing project. Besides having that slope going up, there's also Beacon Street on the north side is a hill, and there's slopes going east and west. There was an extreme amount of concern from people that the moving of the station into the middle would require seniors who use the T to do their shopping to drag their carts up the hill, whereas at Fairbanks, it would be right at the big senior housing place. There was a discussion of, the stoplights and feeling unsafe to cross Beacon Street with just little flashing lights. We look at it as what is around the stops and not just the distance between the stops as being important. We were told on Monday that this in-between stop was chosen because of the size of the hill, the size of the ramps, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody just said today at this meeting that you were going to install ramps at Fairbanks and Brandon Hall. And so my question is, how are you supposed to get from the stop to those ramps? Are you supposed to get off on the stop, go down to the street, walk up to Fairbanks, and then get on the ramp to get closer to where you live so you don't have to climb the hill on Beacon Street? And as a co-petitioner of the recently passed tree warrant article, if you're going to have 3 ramps that are so large, you're going to be taking down trees. And we look at saving trees that are 3 and 6 inches. So my question is, are you really going to have 3 ramps? And if you're going to have the 3 ramps, why not have the stop at Fairbanks where the senior housing is located? That's pretty much it. And I would urge you to sort of consider some of the issues, like what these stops, who these stops serves.
Before you begin, I couldn't hear a word of what that woman was saying. Can you summarize what she was saying on Zoom call?
I can summarize to the best of my ability with my notes.
If you take another call, if you could raise the volume, because back here, I couldn't hear anything.
So it was Fran Perler, I believe is her last name. She's a town meeting member. She's also on the Council on Aging. She is concerned with consolidation of stops.
She said that 20% of the population of Brookline are seniors, and that segment is growing, and that's not just here in Brookline, that's nationwide. She said that there was a meeting of LCAC Community Action Networks regarding, and they had a conversation for about an hour regarding Fairbanks Brandon Hall stops. She's concerned about the elevation distance between the lower level of Beacon and the upper, and people carrying groceries or other things, and how do they make that trek? And today it's not easy, I'm sure, as well. So we are proposing 2 ramps, and I'm gonna or they're actually walkways, but they're designed as ramps in terms of railings and whatnot, but I'll let the technical team talk about that a little bit. So she's talking about how difficult is it to get off the train and then make your way up in terms of going to a ramp, I believe, and then working your way up to the upper level of Beacon Street, if that makes sense. That was to the best of my ability. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about the location of Fairbanks Brandon Hall Station. So we touched on it a little bit, and Mark clarified earlier that we're looking at right now 2, we're calling them sloped walkways. So they're under 5% grade. They meet the standard ADA guidance for a sidewalk. So they're flatter than a ramp would be that would need level landings. We also are looking at the location of the Fairbanks Brandon Hall stop with respect to the roadway grade. As you get closer to the Fairbanks location, the roadway is a little bit steeper, which is going to create a non-accessible condition when you're boarding the train. I definitely understand that it's a longer walk, but with pathways that connect the new platform location to the existing crossing and stairway at Fairbanks, with the construction of a new slope walkway to get up to the higher side of the outbound side of Beacon Street, all the accommodations again will be accessible and open to the public. So 2 ramps that will go from kind of each side, one at the stairway that exists at Brandon Hall and one at the stairway that exists at the Fairbanks Street stop right now. Hopefully that answers the question.
Fern, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
You said 1 stairwell and ramp at Brandon and 1 at Fairbanks, and is there going to be 1 at the stop in the middle? And does that mean that whole distance is going to be a stop? And how many trees is that going to take? The other issue is there's the issue of lower Beacon Street to upper Beacon Street, that height. But once you get on, the problem was if you get on Beacon Street, north side from Brandon Hall or the intermediate stop, there's a steep hill you have to walk up to get to the senior housing. And that's really difficult for a lot of people carrying their groceries and will reduce their independence.
Okay, so I heard a couple of questions there, and I'll try and touch on all of them as best as I can remember. So I apologize if I miss anything. So the station location that we're looking at, it's 200. It's a long platform, and it's kind of cheated more towards the Brandon Hall location. So it's not in the middle, and there won't be a third ramp location. The number of trees is another thing that you mentioned, and our team and Don had kind of alluded to this. We're currently working through different variations of the alignment for those slope walkways that minimize the number of trees. I can't say exactly the number there, but again, we know that there's going to be a number of them, knowing that that hillside is pretty full of trees right now, both, the 2-inch smaller size upwards of the 14 inches and greater diameter of breast height. I do know that you mentioned the steep hill that you need to traverse when walking down Beacon Street, and I think that this project isn't going to be solving that problem, unfortunately. But like I mentioned before, all the pathways to and from the platform are going to be accessible and under that 5% to meet the ADA guidance. Again, flat and as streamlined as we could possibly make it. So again, I couldn't hear all of your questions there, Fran. So hopefully I touched on the important ones for you. Is there anything that you heard that
I think and just the consolidation of stops. We are sympathetic to that. I think when we go to the 225-foot platform, those stops are so close together. And given the cross slopes that we're trying to provide as well,
we're pretty much at the location that we need to be at, but that is being, looked at continually. But I think we've had site visits, we've vetted it, and I think the location that we have now is the only one, quote unquote, that we found at this time that works.
And Fran, we've adjusted the speaker, so we're going to test to see if it works. If we've missed anything, let us know. Just one moment. Fran, feel free to unmute yourself to make sure that we are able to answer all your questions, or if there's anything else that we're missing.
Testing 1, 2, 3. I hear you very well. I'm sorry you haven't heard me. But you get the idea that people are really concerned about not the spacing between the stops, but who is served at each of the stops and what their needs are. And that's all I would urge you to consider.
We hear you,
But
Fran.
thank you.
We're glad that you're able to get your questions answered. Okay, the next person we see is Lee. Lee, I'm asking you to unmute and then you can go ahead and speak.
Hi. I live at 1550 Beacon Street, and one of the issues I have is I used to live in DC and Washington, DC, and the metro there on all their outdoor stops had these flashing lights on the platform itself to alert people like me who are deaf. I cannot hear cars. I cannot hear the trains coming. And every time I walk across the track, it just scares me because I can't hear the trains coming, and some of them can come really fast. So I think any outdoor stops should have like these flashing lights like they do in Washington DC metro system, flashing when the train is like maybe 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever they designate the distance. And that's, whatever the design ends up being for the Brandon Hall or the Fairbanks station, any outdoor station throughout the whole MBTA system needs to have that kind of thing. And I don't hear anybody talking about that.
Thank you for that, Lee.
Yeah, that's terrific feedback, Lee. Thank you very much. I don't know if Mark or Tim, you have any comments on that, but we'll certainly consider that and look to that.
Thank you.
Beacon Street. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, and I am hopeful, but I am very confused by this latest presentation. I'm a visual person, and I'm sorry you don't have one of your drawings, your beautiful drawings to show us. But my understanding from what you've all been saying is the T-stop will be in front of Stone Home, which is the spot that I've seen on the map. But then there's going to be ways that people can walk on raised sidewalks. Is that what you're talking about?
Can you pull the presentation back up? I think it's helpful.
Yeah, I think we do have a graphic for it, and
Let's pull it up.
Yeah, I mean, I have.
I hear you. It's hard to imagine, yes.
For everyone in the Zoom room, we're just going to be sharing the screen to pull it back up for everyone in the space here, as well as on Zoom to be able to see it. Just a few moments.
The other thing I want to say, which in one of these things, I've been reading all this stuff for a couple of months now, is they talked about earlier that the ramps would be covered rampways, which I think is a bonanza. So, I'm really interested in how people are going to access this. I think your name is Mark. Yeah. Oh, okay, whatever.
The other guy's Mark.
He talked about the slope of the hill going up when you hit the sidewalk. That is a key factor. I mean, it really is that our building 1550 is at the top of that hill. And currently, people have to, when they take the T and they've been shopping, they have to go all the way to Washington Square because they can get off there and then come up that hill to get to Fairbanks. If the stop is at Fairbanks, they get off the T, they cross the street at a light that you press a button and it says, wait, or safe to cross. And then they're right there. If they go down to where the stone house is, or stone home, I think it's called, the apartment building, they come out and they have probably the highest part of the incline to walk to get back up to Lancaster and Beacon, where our building is. So it's this business of that there are going to be walkways that they can go so they don't have to go to Stone Home and walk up the hill. That's positive, but I can't envision what the difference is between a ramp and a walkway.
Exactly. And Tim had alluded to that when he talks about less than 5% slope, so the grade of it has to be less than 5%. With a ramp,
it's 8.3.
Yes, it's much steeper. And so although we're providing amenities on these walkways or sidewalks, recognizing that people could still have difficulties, elderly people, maybe they need to grab a railing once in a while, or maybe they need
railings.
Yes.
There'll be railings
So it's
and there'll be a bench.
designed-
Sorry.
Go right ahead, Tim.
Yeah, there'll be railings and there'll be a bench halfway up. The idea is that they're located where the stairs are now, right at each of the existing stations, and there'll be switchback walkways, so they're a little bit longer of a path to travel, but at the midpoint at them, there'll be a bench for sitting and waiting. And I think we're gonna try and get a graphic up on the screen. It's in one of the backup slides, just to show you exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
But
that would be great. That would be great to see.
But the
that.
plan is to make sure that, like you said, if you're getting up at either of those stops, you have to walk a much farther distance and there's a much steeper slope for you to traverse to get back to where your home is. So the idea is trying to.
So that will, because Tommy in his presentation needs for access over to Fairbanks School.
Yes.
So that is still maintained there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can just point to
Okay,
the
yeah,
people
great.
in the room, and I don't know if the people on the Zoom will be able to see me.
So you can do it on the cursor on the
yeah.
computer.
Thanks, Tim.
So yeah, so this is the platform here. This green shaded area is our proposed platform location. And then these blue shaded areas, one here and then one over here is kind of underneath this thing. But those are the slope walkways that I was referring to.
But
Right?
how do they get to those walkways?
So there's this yellow here. So this here is one path. Again, if you're heading towards Fairbanks, you'd be walking kind of in
This way.
what will in the future be the bridle path that we spoke of earlier.
Right.
When that's constructed in the future, those will be kind of co-located again as a shared use path for all users. So then you have to cross the tracks to get over to the purple, which is the existing stairway that goes up to there, or the blue that was our sloped walkway.
Oh, so that's the slope walkway. Okay.
Yeah, that's
And
this
the
one.
same at Brandon Hall then too?
Yes.
Yep, and then this one on this other side of the image here.
You see on the scroll, right?
This one
Yeah,
here, so, and you can see there's all these green, all these circles here are the trees that are in the area, so we're trying to locate these slope walkways to avoid as many of those as possible, knowing that we're definitely gonna impact some of them. But the idea is whether you wanna go towards the Brandon Hall side or the Fairbanks side, there's an accessible walkway in this yellow, or you're walking along the platforms to access these slope
All right,
walkways.
and is there a walkway to go up to Beacon from the middle of the platform, from?
No, at this point, we're not putting
All
in
right, so
another stairwell.
the only access to Beacon is going to be where the current Brandon Hall is and where the current Fairbanks is. There isn't going to be another one coming up.
Correct. And I think it's maybe been a little confusing because we've had multiple variations of this over the past couple of months. This one, I think, is retaining the access points that exist now as best we can and making those accessible pathways to and from the new station location. That's this green shaded area here.
Okay, and I want to say one more thing about the flashing lights. I went out and I decided I didn't have to use those because I live at Lancaster and Beacon. But when you stand between those two posts as a pedestrian, you cannot see if the lights are flashing because the lights are flashing towards the cars, so you don't see anything. And I mean, that's a real danger, even if the station remains at Brandon Hall, something has to be done about that.
Yeah, and I think that someone else, maybe that gentleman that
Yeah,
made that comment as well. The MBTA is going to be taking a look at the traffic signals in the area. I think that what we know is that at the existing Fairbanks, it's a red stoplight.
Oh, yeah.
Brandon Hall
regular,
is just the flashing beacon. So I think that there'll be some more conversations with the town, with MassDOT, depending on whose jurisdiction it is to modify those lights to make sure that the access to the station that we're providing is the safest that we possibly can. And if that's where the station is going to be, where these green areas are, we want to make sure that the primary path of travel for people going to that station is safe, accessible, and has the correct traffic control device there.
No, is there a way I can get a copy of this diagram?
Yeah, I believe that the
Yeah.
deck will be posted. I think.
Yes, so for everyone here in the Zoom as well as in the room, there will be the posting of this meeting up on the website as well as the presentation slide. So you'll have access to all of them.
Okay, so
We'll send everybody who signed up in our sign up sheet when you came in, as well as those who are registered in the Zoom chat, access to that link so that you can have our presentation and recording there.
Okay, and this will be, because this wasn't part of the original presentation.
We'll make sure that that's visible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is all part of the feedback we're getting from the town, right? We're trying to be responsive to what we've heard. So this is one of the
Yeah, no,
alternatives that we've
it's-
come up with. And we're going to continue to work with you to try to develop solutions that really work for everybody.
Yeah.
As best we can.
Can you clarify that on the right, that station, the ramp goes all the way from lower beacon to upper beacons? Is that where you're?
Yeah, that's correct. The blue shading I was pointing to on the right side.
Right.
Yeah, it's from the platform track level up to the westbound side of Beacon Street, which is a significant grade.
So about 20 feet?
So about 20 feet. That's why those are so long, because we have them much flatter. And like I mentioned, at the switchback point, the point where it turns around, we have benches there again for stopping and for being able to sit down.
So those ramps are about 200 feet long in each direction?
Do
Something
you know
like
the exact number?
I don't know the exact number,
more or less.
but yeah,
More.
whatever it takes to, can we keep it less than 5%? The MBTA requires us to actually design at 4.5%.
Are you able to speak a little bit louder for the folks in the room?
Sure. The MBTA requires us to design slope walks at 4.5%, which is a little more under the ADA requirement. That's just so that it can account for any design tolerance or construction tolerance when it actually gets built to ensure that it's less than 5%.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sergio Modigliani. I'm an architect. I live at 1160 Beacon Street. And I wanted to use a technique that I use in my own work, which is to take a conversation from the particulars, which is where we have been in the last few minutes, to a couple of more general concerns and considerations. We're in a community that, whether wisely or not, chose to set a new net zero carbon goal for itself, not in 2050, because that's what the state did, but in 2040. And so carbon footprint and climate change, which we've heard you mention, seem to be of paramount importance. I'm having a very hard time reconciling the idea that in order to get improved accessibility, we are reducing the number of public transit stations. How can this be compatible with our goal? Because to me, it implies some people are going to choose alternate methods, Lyft, Uber, car, or whatever. And so we then raise the question, well, why does that have to happen? It could be financial, or it could be physical. That is an engineering dimensional dilemma. I have not heard that articulated in a manner yet that I've been able to understand why, for example, Kent and Powell is being eliminated. As a second and related point, yesterday in the Globe, we heard that Governor Healy has offered $8 billion as a draft for the budget to the legislature to consider. Surely some portion of that would eventually come to Brookline. And perhaps the financial considerations that the MBTA has been working with might be changed by that capital infusion. And if eliminating stations is partly a financial problem, perhaps we have an opportunity to reset and to recast our goals, perhaps be more compatible with the community's carbon footprint thoughts. And finally, I would leave you with the question that if it is in fact mandatory that we close the station, I need to have a clearer understanding of why Kent and Powell is the preferred choice compared to Hawes, that I understand now may be the contender to remain. And I thank all of you, public officials and MBTA and MEPA, for the work you've been doing, because the goal of accessibility is highly laudable. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sergio. That's feedback. I had spoken with Mark from our design team, and I think, Mark, if you wouldn't mind addressing the concerns, just how we got where we are. And your feedback is meaningful. In other words, we'll take it back and consider that. We haven't made these decisions that are carved in stone today. We want to go in a direction that is best for everyone. So when you talk about convenience, we want it to be convenient too. We want people to decide to take the T. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So going back to the beginning, I'm going to start with your cost question. The MBTA never told us you had to consolidate stops because of cost. That has never been a consideration. It will reduce costs, but it was never, we were never told to do that. It was never the reason for the idea of consolidation. If we look at the station that we have right here, right now, we're looking at the two stations. Right now, Brandon Hall is split across this crossing. Fairbanks is split across this crossing. We can no longer have split crossings across the platform because we're raising the platform. Right, so we have to have two separate stations if we're going to have away from the platform, away from these. Wisely, I mean, if we're going to put in two stations, we'd probably put one here and one here. They'd almost be touching each other. Realistically, there's 600 feet between here, or 650 feet between these two. You got a 225-foot long platform. Plus, as we've talked about, you have sloped walkways that are coming up from the flat areas to the 14-inch platform in the future, which adds about another 25 feet to either end. So in this particular case, if we were to build two platforms in the same area where they exist today, they'd be about 100 feet apart by the time you got to the end of construction of one to the other. So that's one of the major considerations here as well. Is thinking about stopping trains, we talk about service. If you stop a train and then you go 500 feet ahead and you're stopping again, you never even really get up to speed. So again, in order to try to keep the capacity at a maximum, that's one of the reasons why we consolidate these two. Going back to Kent, Hawes, it has been a toss-up, no doubt about that. I think I tried to explain that if we remove Hawes and keep it and go from Kent all the way to St. Mary's, where we have the next station, it's over 2,000 feet, which is much longer than we try to space our stations. We really try to keep them within a quarter mile, 1,200 to 1,500 feet. So again, there is more population, if you will, a higher ridership at Kent. We recognize that versus Hawes. But again, when we think about the spacing of stations, we try to keep that quarter mile distance. The other thing is when we think of the spacing between Kent Street and St. Paul, that's also a very short distance. They're actually in the same block, or they will be in the same block. They're actually the outbound on St. Paul Street and the inbound on Kent is basically the same block. Again, if we're lengthening platforms, we're getting them so close together. Again, that's one of the other reasons why we chose Kent versus Hawes.
If I may, just two quick responses. The Brandon Hall Fairbank argument, I think, is pretty clear. It's sort of an event which we can take care of. The Kent Powell versus Hawes, I'm not understanding because those same dimensions, it's about 880 in one direction and 840 in the other. And I guess my question would be that if you keep Hawes, you have a very short distance from there to St. Mary's.
That's true, but you
And-
have,
and again,
you get close to 1,800 feet between Hawes and St. Paul.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, not only from you, but I think you've heard from other people that there's a desire for the T to consider the context of these stops. It's not only the mathematical consideration of I'm 800 feet away or I'm 2,000 feet away. Hey, where are the riders getting on? Where is it convenient? So we are hearing that and we'll take that back and look at these designs again and do a deeper dive. And again, we have many more meetings coming up and we hope that people participate and give that terrific feedback. It's an excellent point.
If I may, one last comment, which is that you are on a clearly a quite accelerated schedule. We see you issuing preliminary construction documents in spring. And you're looking for your certificate by January 29th, the week after the comments are closing. You haven't heard from preservation, you haven't been in touch with them, you're gonna see them on the 28th. I hope, number one, that you'll extend your comment deadline and allow an opportunity for the boards and commissions to provide their thoughts to you. And therefore, I don't know what this means to your bigger schedule, because as an architect, I understand what you're struggling with, but perhaps a word of caution. And thank you very much for your comments and for yours.
Thank you, Sergio. I just want to clarify something. Sometimes we use terms people don't understand. You get it. I get it. You're an architect. But what I said at the beginning of this meeting was that this is a design build delivery method. It's not design bid build. So we're only at 30%. And we will continue to be partnering with the town as we develop this project.
But we would all agree that the decision between, for example, Kent Powell versus Hawes is not a minor difference. It involves an entirely different set of engineering documents and assumptions and so forth.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
it is absolutely true. Yeah, but it's not a bridge too far. Let me also state that.
I'm glad to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, for the sake of time, we're right at 7:30, close to it. We're at 7:28. And our meeting is set to end in 30 minutes. However, since we started a little bit later, we'll go for 5 additional minutes to get everyone going. We have answered a lot of questions in the room. So I'd like to just transition to one hand that I see here in the chat, and then we can go back to your hand, okay? So Leslie, we're going to ask you to unmute now, and then you can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It says the host is not allowing me to unmute myself.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Leslie, we can hear you just fine. You're actually unmuted and we heard that. So please feel free to say that again to make sure.
Great, thanks a lot. My first question is whether or not anyone's been keeping track of the chat, because in order to try and not repeat questions that other people have answered, I've been putting questions into the chat and haven't seen any of them addressed. I happen to be hard of hearing, and I'm still confused about the consolidated station alternative. There's a very knowledgeable gentleman who keeps standing up and talking, but unfortunately, he speaks a bit fast for me. So if you stand up again, you're wearing a dark sports jacket. If you stand up again, I'll just ask you to speak a little bit slowly. What I have yet to figure out is why Fairbanks was not chosen as the spot for the station. A number of people have said, and I certainly agree as a walker for over 40 years on Beacon Street, that the spot at Fairbanks is the highest spot as you're heading west on Beacon Street. Just when you pass the residential building and the synagogue, it starts to slope down. And so to me, it seems that both because there is a residence where there are many seniors, of which I am also, and people who have disabilities, it still seems to me that that would be the best stop, the best location for the stop. As I look at the consolidated station alternative chart, the bottom gold line is quite an extensive walk that would cut down on it. And we've already talked about the fact that there's a full set of traffic lights. So could you please elucidate why Fairbanks was not chosen? And thank you.
Leslie, before you get an answer, you mentioned that you were hard of hearing. So I want to make sure that you know that the Zoom actually has a captioning feature. So you can click on show captions at the bottom of your screen and be able to access the captioning while we're communicating.
Yes.
So please let us know if that's an option for you so that you can also keep track of the meeting by captions as well as what we're saying in the room as well.
Yes, that is one of the fantastic wonders of Zoom is closed captioning, and I'm also wearing a headset. I think ASL is beautiful, but I have never learned it, so I'm just enjoying watching the interpreter. But I still, when you're looking and reading and listening at the same time, you can still miss things. And that's why I'm bringing up my question.
Of course. Thank you so much for bringing it up. We appreciate this and value that you brought it up with us as well.
Yeah, so thank you for that comment, Leslie, and I will try and speak loudly so you can hear me. The location that we're showing here for the consolidated station, it's primarily driven by the grade of the roadway. When we have a platform that's on a steep grade, it creates a non-accessible condition for people boarding the train. So as you mentioned, that is one of the higher portions of Beacon Street, right? The westbound side and then the tracks themselves are on a relatively steep grade. So we're looking to locate the platform at a flatter section of the corridor. That way we can make sure that the access to and from on the train, as well as best we can, the paths connecting to the slope walkways on either side are accessible and are appropriate paths to travel for all users. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well, the only thing I would add is.
So when boarding train. Yeah, so my colleague Mark here just wanted me to mention that, as you're boarding a train, your cross slope. Yeah, so on a steeper section of track, right? As a person in a mobility device or with difficult walking is boarding the train, your cross slope would be the grade of the roadway. And again, to meet accessibility guidelines, we need that to be less than 2%, ideally 1.5%. So that again is partly why we're locating this platform, so that as passengers are walking along the platform, as well as boarding the train, kind of walking perpendicular to the tracks, they have that accessible cross slope and running slope to be able to make it.
Leslie, were you able to access that information? Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Were you able to access that information? Okay. Did you catch everything that was said, or would you like anything repeated?
No, I'm okay. Thank you very much. The only thing that I would add is hopefully everyone has heard the great concerns about crossing Beacon Street, particularly at a flashing light as opposed to a full red and green fixed traffic stop, because that is very much what needs to be considered at Brandon Hall. And I would even suggest considering keeping the one at Fairbanks. I have had friends living between the two. And as I've said, I've walked there for over 40 years. It's a difficult section of Beacon Street. So thank you very much for your time and all your efforts.
Of course, Leslie. Thank you. And also, we are keeping track of the chat. One of the reasons why I did not respond to your chat is because I knew you were raising your hand. So I wanted to make sure that you were able to ask it out loud for everyone as well. So yeah, we're excited that you gave us your feedback and we look forward to being in touch with you. Our next comment is from you.
Yes, I'm Al Elstein and I live near the Kent Street T stop. And it's unfortunate that we only get to hear about these things at the 11th hour after the result already is sort of a pseudo fait accompli. Maybe it's Kent, maybe it's the other one. And the decline of a stop, and I think several gentlemen here have talked about that. I found no one of the seniors that I know in favor of this, and they're certainly upset that you're already saying it's an either or, basically the people who do time management that I know say you're not going to save a lot of time by eliminating that one stop if we're having two that are close together. But we have these problems that seniors have, and I'll just give you an example under the current conditions, which may change depending on where you do it. For me to get to the St. Paul stop, I have to at some point cross either at Sewell Avenue or on Beacon Street, St. Paul Street. At Sewell Avenue, as somebody who doesn't necessarily see well, they have yield pedestrian signs. The town has not wanted to put a light up there or anything. I have almost been hit there many times. And I see the same thing as St. Paul Street drivers go through. So when we're talking about, I'm not talking about the length of the things or where you're moving it. You're talking about, when I talk to time management people, you're going to save a minute or two. First of all, a lot of times you get to the red lights where you are. And secondly, right now, it's stop only if people request it or they see something. So you're not going to save a lot of time. I'm not going to argue that whether St. Paul or Hawes is the more valuable. I think just the people I know, they're all valuable. We're coming in at the 11th hour. There's been no rationalization why we have to get rid of either one of those stops. And I'd like some of you people to take a little bit of something where you don't see that well and try to cross that St. Paul Street, either at Beacon or at Sewell. And you'll find that you almost get, people just want to rush through with the cars. You see the same thing at Brandon Hall where they talk about here. You can't have a process where at the 11th hour you just say to people, we've made 80% of the decision that we're going to eliminate these stops and expect the people not to, at least when I lived in Minnesota, they would be rioting in place here. But I have not talked to one senior who lives in that area that uses the T that is in favor of eliminating that stop. And I suspect if I talked to the people of Hawes Street, it would be the same thing with the senior medical building there. And by the way, Ojibwe Shalom not only does its Jewish services, but it does a fundamentalist Christian service on Sunday where many, many people take the T. This is not an open process. It was kind of like you made your decision and you're talking either or, and I do human problem solving. You need to take a step back and understand what you're dealing with. And the second comment, when they eliminated bus stops on Mount Auburn Street on the Watertown, we're going to eliminate, they really didn't save any time, but it's very difficult for certain seniors to get certain places because now it's every other stop. So you're not getting you don't have a process when in the 11th hour you say, oh, by the way, Stop and Shop is closing, or oh, by the way, we're going to eliminate a stop. We don't see the time savings. There's enough fuss. I don't know about Fairbanks, but it sounds like there's enough fuss there. So maybe it's not so terrible to have stops that are close together. And I will comment this from the last time I lived in Boston, they eliminated on the C line, the Center Street stop where you're not going to walk up the senior housing. People said it's only a block or two. That affected the people at 100 Center Street, even though it was only a short distance. So when you do these things, you have a senior population. And the last thing I will say is, as a senior, I had the ride for a while, which I didn't use always. When it came up for renewal, so you don't always get these things. I'm well into my senior years. They had a new subcontractor and they said, oh, you're well enough to take the T all the time now. And here's a map of the T. So if you don't want to have more pressure for the ride, you've got a problem here. And the problem is that, as Cool Hand Luke once said, this is a failure of communication. You're coming in at the 11th hour, giving an either or thing, whether it's Fairbanks or here, and you're really not going to save a lot of time. And it may cost you a little bit more money to build a thing there, but the Hawes Street people need their stop, I think, for that medical building. I can tell you the people who go to 1180 Beacon Street who take that need that. The Christians that use the Ohobai Shalom use that stop a lot. And I can tell you, if you consolidate stops, you're going to have more people and more chaos. I can tell you in the morning, I can get on that T and that driver is so anxious to keep moving. I don't have time to grab something on, and not everybody gives a senior seat to people that are senior. I have fallen into people's laps any number of times. I'll stop there. Not a good process here to be talking about something that's almost decided at the 11th hour, and nobody asked anybody or around my neighborhood 3, 4, 5 months ago about whether they would like that stop eliminated. And I'm sure the Hawes Street people are the same way. Good point.
You have some folks in the chat that are agreeing with your comment as well. And would you like to give a response to that?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying and I understand the frustration, and I assure you, we are going to consider all of these comments. And I don't say that lightly. I take everything very seriously. We are hearing that it matters who boards and how many people board and what their conditions are. And I know that your comments went much broader than that. And I appreciate that there's frustration across, not just to have to do with this project, but in other areas as well. Safety matters with crossing the street, not just because you're coming to our platform to board our trains. We get it. And we're definitely working with NASDOT and Brookline to make those changes so that we can have people cross safely. Mark or Tim, did you want to comment?
Well, yeah, I would just, if I could, just comment briefly on the 11th hour. We have been out in the public quite a bit. We were at the Transportation Board in February. Robbie had an open house in February. We met the Transportation Board again in July. We've met in public session with the Disabilities Commission. We met in public session with the Tree Commission. We met in public session with the Joint Committee on Accessibility or Mobility Committee, pedestrian and bicycle. So we've been out in the public quite a bit. I apologize. I regret that maybe yourself didn't hear it.
Comment on that. Not once in my mailbox. No, we're not email people.
I understand.
But not once in my mailbox that I get something that said, oh, by the way, there's an important meeting for you to go to, and it has to do with the fact that your T-stop may disappear. You may have been out there, but how you reach seniors that are not doing texts, emails, are not having Representative Vitolo reach out to them. I got no notice of this, and when it came out, I'm walking on my street, and it's interesting. The people who don't take the T said, "What's the problem? You only have to walk another 1,000 feet." The people who use the T saying, "Oh my God, what are these people doing?"
So again, as Julie said, we're going to take your comment very seriously. We're going to take it back. If we can find a way to keep these two stops, I'm sure Julie will force, push it.
And the time management people say, you're not going to save that much time between here and Cleveland Circle, even if you keep these two stops there.
Yeah, there are various things that can happen.
And
the
the
stop
history
goes away.
of eliminating bus stops didn't work very well on the 41 to down Mount Auburn. People stopped living their lives as good as they could.
Yeah, thank you for the input, and we'll consider other ways to do outreach as well. It's all good stuff. Ashley?
Yeah. Thank you for the input. And I just wanted to note that outreach for this meeting, just to supplement what you asked, we handed out approximately 150 flyers at Brookline Village on the 13th. Flyers were posted at the inbound and outbound side platforms of the Brookline Village Station. Flyers were also distributed to businesses and stakeholders on Washington Street, between Thayer Place and Station Street, and on Harvard Street up to Weber Street. Some of the key stakeholders were included in this outreach were Brookline Town Hall, the Public Library, the Police Department, USPS, as well as the Credit Union, Santander Bank, Brookline Bank, and the Senior Center, as well as the Brookline Center for Community and Mental Health. We also did outreach in Coolidge Corner, where approximately 150 flyers were also distributed. The flyers were posted inbound and outbound on the side platforms of Coolidge Corner Station, and they're distributed to various businesses along the area. And then we personally spoke with seniors, as well as we're in touch with the Brookline Senior Center, as well as the Public Library again, but the Coolidge Corner branch and the Coolidge Corner USPS, along with a plethora of businesses, which I'm happy to follow up with you and give you those exact business names, and community groups that work with seniors very closely in Brookline as well, which I'm happy to share with you offline if you're interested in that. For the sake of time, I do want to say that to complement what you're saying, we have someone named Julie Friedson in the chat who said, taking away Kent Street is a disservice to the local community, and we have not been consulted. This is a major loss for our community. Linda also said that she agrees and that we need the Kent Street stop. Julia said these consultations you mentioned have not reached people who live around the Kent stop. Diane said, I'm curious about the needs of our veterans as the Sea Line becomes ADA compliant in the future. Does it eliminate the NBTA ride program? And then we also had a follow-up about Kent Street again that was sent to me privately, just as the supplement to everything that was shared. I do know that there are 2 more people left, so we'll get to the both of you, and then we should be at the end of the meeting. If anyone has any questions or comments or feedback, I will give you all our email that you can contact us at. And the email has also been shared in the chat for everyone in the chat who would like to stay in touch with us. So we have 2 more people left, and then we'll close the meeting.
Okay. I just want to say that I don't doubt that there have been meetings. I've been aware that there have been certain meetings, like with the Transportation Board going back to February, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't doubt the presentation that was just made as to all the outreach things that were done. There can never be enough outreach. But what I do want to say is, going back through those meetings that you said were held going back to February, at which of those meetings did anybody from the public who uses the Sea Line say, you know what we think is a good idea for making this more accessible? Take away our stops. Take away 2 of our stops. Nobody's saying that. And yet it always seems to be the assumption at the beginning of the meeting that decision has been made in the presence of community input. I don't know anybody who's providing community input that says, why don't you eliminate 2 of our stops? And by the way, cut down, 80 trees. That's a good way to do disability access in the Sea Line.
If I could just comment on that, I think people have not said that directly, take away stops, but on the flip side of this discussion are people that are saying, can't you get these trains to get me downtown any faster? Why do we have so many stops?
And
There's
how much
somebody in the
faster
back
will this
nodding,
be
yeah.
developed?
Pardon me?
How much faster will this get the
High management people say not that much that I've talked to.
And I don't dispute that. I think at one stop, it's not a lot. And then there's this transportation priority system, the TPS that Tommy Vitolo spoke about, that we're trying to implement. Is going to be implemented to move these trains past the light to save another few seconds. And I'm told that it's cumulative. But that doesn't mean that we're weighting that decision stronger than other feedback that we've heard tonight. So I want you to know that we're taking that back seriously and considering that. And this is an ongoing process. Yes, we want to get to construction. But even as we work with our design build firm, we're going to be making these adjustments to the project. And I appreciate the fact that you're also sympathetic to the number of trees. 80 trees is a lot of trees. We are working really hard to reduce that number. And that means making adjustments to our design, moving platforms, not to have split platforms, to have the train prioritization, perhaps leaving them as parallel so that we can save those trees. So we're saying that's not our top priority all the time, is to save time. We want to consider all of this feedback and make the best decision. So I'm sympathetic to both of those.
And I think, you do a very good job and you give good answers. I think the answers have to make sense to people. And it doesn't make sense intuitively that you're saving time if you cut a second or a minute or 2 off of the train ride, but add a minute or 2 to get to the stop. That doesn't save anybody their time.
That's how I calculate my commute as well, from my front door to my office door.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
I think there was, go ahead.
Okay, Lisa, just responding to your chat, we will include everybody that has RSVP'd to this meeting and has attended this meeting to our listserv. So moving forward, you'll have access to all of our Green Line related communication, so you'll be in the know of all the things and be able to stay in touch with us. So thank you for noting that in the chat, and we look forward to adding you to our listserv as well. Who is our
I think
next?
there was one.
Okay.
Hey, so my name's Ryan. I'm a Brookline resident that just moved here with my wife in June. Actually, we're both separately residents of Brookline a couple years ago, moved back because we love it here. And I just want to make a few comments first. I really appreciate the professionalism from you guys in the room and how you guys just want to get down to work. Because I think a lot of people who are my age who have watched this happen over the course of a few years have just seen the MBTA in a state of disrepair and sluggishness. And this like was really encouraging to me as a person who lives here. I love that you guys want to get this done. I love that you want to take all this feedback. And I love you're taking all of our comments. So it's really appreciated. And I've heard a few comments about, taking away stops to make things less accessible, maybe has an effect on climate change and other things. And my personal counter to that is people who are my age who are taking the T find it incredibly frustrating how long it takes to take the T downtown, much to the point you just made about a couple minutes ago. And anything that's done in that vein, like for instance, in this case where, Brandon Hall and Fairbanks are being combined because they're so close together, seems to be a very clear win because you're keeping a lot of the same walkways. You're trying to keep them on the platform. You're trying to reduce the overhead. Because that's another thing that I think a lot of people my age see is there's just a lot of overhead for a lot of public agencies. And reducing that overhead goes a long way to, I think, instilling confidence that it's being recognized that you guys want to ensure an efficient system. And in the case of, let's take Hawes and St. Mary's, that is an example where some of my friends and I have joked to each other, you can throw a rock at St. Mary's from Hawes Street. It feels a little, again, I'm in my 20s. So take this with a grain of salt for everybody who is not, or who's not my age. But it does feel a little silly to have them walking distance from the other. But again, take it with a grain of salt. As a young 20-year-old who sometimes runs to various T stops.
Lucky you, right?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, take it with a grain of salt. But one of the questions I had was with regard to the platforms that are being proposed. I guess one half of the question is, so it seems like something that's being proposed is doing this in two separate places. My question would be, I guess, why not do it all at once? And then the other part of it would be, is there thought being put towards the amount of light pollution that can potentially be created around those stops as a result of this? First of all, it's great that they'll probably be more well lit compared to how they are today. But if you were to say take the B branch consolidation, those are very bright, but it's less noticeable because there's a lot of businesses in that area, and the BU is also there. So I don't think people really think about it all that much. But since there's a lot of residences that are directly up against these stops, I think it would also be worth considering how much light is being cast and in what direction. I guess it's kind of a minor thing, all things considered, but just one thing to think about if we're going to go through and reconstruct these T stops. I had a couple others, but it might be good.
Can I just respond to that? Just a couple of things quickly. Did you say that you thought we were doing it in phases?
You are, you're gonna raise the 8 and then come back. and
Oh,
do
I'm
everything
sorry. Yes,
over.
yes.
Yeah,
To go to
yes.
14,
Got it.
which will change every ramp that you build now.
Yes, I'll let Mark or Tim speak to that. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I can speak to
missed
both of those questions. So the purpose of doing this in phases, with the interim first phase being 8 inches above top of rail, the intent there is the legacy fleet of vehicles, right? So currently operating, they're type 7s, types 8s, and type 9s.
Sure.
The type 7s and type 8s have fold-out doors. And if the platforms were hired to provide that level boarding, those doors get stuck on the platforms. That actually happened a couple of times at the B branch consolidation, where there's a curb a little bit too high on the approaches for walking to it, and the doors got stuck on it. So that's the big reason why these are happening in phases. And there has been discussions around the program on, depending on timeline for when the new vehicles are coming in and when the old legacy vehicles, 7s and 8s in particular, are being retired. There's a potential that it could go directly to 14. I think for these stations in particular, because the goal is to have them done in the next couple of years, that's not a reality for here, right? So that's the big driver of the kind of stepped solution, is so that as the type 10s come in, and they're only coming in, as they start to come in 1 or 2 a month, right? Kind of sporadically, we're not going to go from all legacy to all type 10s all at once.
Yeah,
Right? So that's the kind of goal with that piece. And I did hear this gentleman here, Sergio, I think, mention the slope walkway access. So when we've laid out these platforms, we've laid them out so that the lengths of those will accommodate an accessible path of travel for the future condition, right? So that they will be flatter in the interim when you have a shorter platform, and then when we raise them, we aren't relocating the platform, we aren't lengthening those slope walkways. We're just adding some material onto the top of it so that we get that additional 6-inch height of the platforms. And then on the lighting question that you mentioned, the second one there, I do understand that the current MBTA lighting standards are very bright, right? They're very bright edge of platforms, crossings of tracks, and crosswalks. So we follow those standards as a starting point. But as we've said multiple times, we're working with the town on the design standards, knowing that the Beacon Street corridor in particularly it's not as bright as Com Ave, as you've mentioned. So trying to work with the lighting standards to match the municipality and the local feel, more so than just having a very bright station, right, an eyesore in the middle. We are using directional lighting, so they're pointing down towards the platforms, and there's a dark sky provision in there as well to kind of help things in the long run. So yeah, hopefully that.
No, I appreciate that. That explains a lot.
Yeah.
I had a couple other questions, if that's okay. It sounds like this might be more of a DOT question, but I'm still gonna throw it out there anyway. There was talk about potentially putting a light up at the new, or at one of the crossings for Brandon Hall Fairbanks. And one of my questions there is, has the idea been thrown around to use something, I think, called a Falcon light, which you can probably be in the Kendall Square area, where it allows, basically the concept for people who in the room that don't know is you still get a red light, cars still have to stop, but eventually it switches to a blinking red light. So if there's nobody in the crosswalk, the car can stop and then continue if the crosswalk is clear. And that also feels like it might be a good middle ground between making sure people have a protected crosswalk, but then also allowing the drivers to.
That's a great suggestion. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Tim.
Yeah, so we just mentioned it's a hawk system is what that's called. It's a different kind of bird. But yeah, I mean, I think that these locations in particular, they're kind of unique crossings. They're not going to be, red, yellow, green lights like there are in major intersections. They're push buttons for pedestrians, but the type of system that gets installed and how it functions, again, making sure that it's safe for pedestrians and not inadvertently stopping vehicular traffic when there's nobody in the area. I think that's the type of system that it needs to be looked at. I don't have any more specifics other than that, but it's a good suggestion and definitely something we'll take back.
Okay, awesome. And then one of my other questions is that hasn't been talked about, but that I'm just personally curious about is when you look at a map of the stations like beyond Washington Square, like so. Obviously, all these stations are getting upgraded to be accessible. But once you get closer to Cleveland Circle, for instance, let's take like Englewood and Dean Road, those are exceptionally close to each other. And I was a little surprised to see that if we are taking away stops, that two that are exceptionally close together, much like these two here, where one of them was not being removed for the sake of, again, reduced overhead. slightly increase speed. And also with the type 10s being bigger, you can accommodate more people at a stop. And then also just sort of off of that and related, same could be potentially said for Dean Road or Tappan, but there might be some disagreement on that because obviously it's more uphill from Washington Square. But I'm mostly bringing this up because let's say you want to go downtown to TD Garden if you want to see a concert. The fastest way to actually get to TD Garden from Washington Square currently is to backtrack to Dean Road, and then get on Beacons Field on the D line because of how long it takes to get on the C line downtown. And there are a lot of students that live up in the Cleveland Circle area that I know, and also my brother-in-law included, who goes to DC, is like, oh, I don't even really bother going downtown because it takes so long. I mean, of course, he can get on the D line, so he's maybe a little bit of that area. Cleveland Circle specifically might be a little different, but just something to think about.
Yeah, and so it's a good point. When we were looking at the different variations of consolidation, that Dean Road was one. And I think that we're still in discussions on, what the impacts to trees are at that particular station.
Sure.
And we talked about it a little bit on the travel time savings. And obviously it's not a lot per train, per location. But one of the metrics we use is in-person vehicle travel time. So it's kind of cumulative over the number of people that are in the train.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, there's more people filling the train at Kent. So each person gets that time savings as opposed to Dean Road, where there's less people getting on at Cleveland Circle and Englewood. So that was part of the reason why that we kind of kept all three of those stations again. There wasn't as huge of a savings for elimination as opposed to the ones closer in to downtown. Again, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but it's not completely a foregone conclusion that station needs to remain. We also know, and Don could speak to it, there's a significant number of tree impacts at Dean Road. I think maybe one of the larger ones, other than this one that we're looking at here, that could be minimized if we're talking about tree impacts, right? Dean Road modifications are definitely resulting in a lot. So
Yeah.
It's a good comment. It's definitely something for us to take back and continue to look at.
Okay.
Thank you.
And my final thought is with all these stations being upgraded to be accessible and also being protected from the road now. Has there been talk about, and also with the signal priority, has there been discussions about potentially increasing the average speed of the Green Line trains now that you don't necessarily have that safety issue of, making sure people are sufficiently clear of the platform when the train is approaching, and also from the traffic?
Yeah, I would say that
on top of that.
I would say that the operating speed is sort of it's governed by the MBTA operations department. Some of it is based on track geometry, curvature, and all of that. And obviously with the intersections, as you mentioned with TSP, there is a potential that if the trains get priority going through the intersections, they'll be able to go at what their current operating speed is, and it'll be faster than they go now, having to stop at every light. So the maximum speed in theory won't necessarily need to be increased to be able to feel a faster train traveling through the area if transit signal priority becomes a reality, right? Because right now it's every block, every red light, every crossing that they have to stop at slows them down. I think maybe Mark mentioned it earlier. Trains are very rarely getting up to their full speed in this section of the corridor. So regardless of whether or not operations wants to increase the speed of trains with transit signal priority, with some of the streamlines that we're talking about for station consolidation, trains are more likely to get up to a faster speed to kind of address that concern you had.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. I really appreciate the time from all of you, and I really appreciate the hard work that's going into this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Great to end on a positive note. Thank you.
Yes, what a joy it's been to be in community with all of you. It's now 8:05, but before we end, Lisa has a blast from the past that she shared in the chat. She said that in the early 80s, there was a sign at St. Mary's saying 10 minutes to Park Street. It's not the number of stops, it's how fast the trains can go, the rails, and how many people who have moved here and how many trains there are. If there were enough trains, albeit running not completely full, better rails, etc., there wouldn't be the commute time we're experiencing. It's not the number of stops. It's not the number of stops it used to work. Thank you for that, Lisa.
Great.
And thank you for the blast from the past. I appreciate spending time with all of you here in this room, and we're now at meeting close. If you have any questions, we'll be sharing the email again in the chat for all of you to be in touch with us, and we look forward to doing just that. And Stefan, we saw the wiki link that you sent us to about, what did you send us? The Hawk Beacon wiki link. Thank you for that, Stefan. We really appreciate your time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.